There is something ancient about the darkness in Japan. Something that breathes, something that waits. Long before horror movies gave us pale women with black hair crawling out of televisions, the Japanese had a name for what they feared most. Onryo, vengeful spirits, the souls of the dead who suffered so deeply in life, from betrayal, from grief, from rage, that death itself could not hold them. Tonight, I am bringing you 3 accounts, 3 men, 3 encounters with something no rational mind should have to explain. These are not ghost stories invented to entertain children. These are testimonies, and by the end of this video, I want you to ask yourself one question. What happens to a soul when it refuses to leave?
My name is Kenji. I am 34 years old. I work in logistics, and I am not the type of man who believes in the supernatural. At least, I wasn't, not before apartment 4C on Arakawa Street in Tokyo. It was 2019. I had just gone through a divorce. My wife and I had been together for 6 years, and the split was ugly, the kind of ugly where you stop recognizing yourself. I needed to get out of our shared apartment, fast and cheap. A colleague mentioned a unit that had just come available. Rent was suspiciously low. I asked why. He shrugged. Previous tenant moved out suddenly. Landlord just wants it filled. I should have pushed harder for an answer. I didn't. The apartment was small but clean, 3rd floor, 1 bedroom, a narrow kitchen, a bathroom with a frosted window that never fully closed. I moved in on a Saturday. By Monday night, I had already started sleeping with the lights on. It began with sounds, not banging or crashing. That would have been almost comforting because it would have had an explanation. These were softer sounds. Wet sounds, like something dragging itself slowly across the floor of the room above me. Except I was on the top floor. There was no room above me. I told myself it was pipes. Old buildings in Tokyo have old pipes, and old pipes make strange sounds. I believed this for exactly 9 days. On the 10th night, I woke up at 3:14 a.m. I remember the exact time because I stared at my clock for a very long time afterward, and there was a woman standing at the foot of my bed. She wasn't like anything I had seen in movies. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't floating. She was just standing there, in a pale yukata, soaked through as if she'd walked through rain, though the night was dry. Her hair hung in long ropes across her face, and her hands were open at her sides, fingers curled just slightly inward, and she was staring at me. I could feel it even through the curtain of black hair. I could not move. I am not exaggerating when I say that. My body simply refused. I lay there, heart slamming so hard I could feel it in my teeth, and I watched her. She didn't move. She just stood there, radiating something I can only describe as sorrow so heavy it had weight. Then she was gone. Not faded, not floated away, just gone. One blink, and the foot of my bed was empty. I did not sleep again that night. I called my colleague in the morning, and this time I demanded the real story. The previous tenant of apartment 4C was a woman named Miyako. She had lived there for 3 years. Her boyfriend had left her without a word, packed his things one afternoon while she was at work, and simply vanished. No letter, no call, nothing. Miyako had waited. She kept the apartment exactly as it was, as though she believed he would return. Neighbors said she stopped eating. She stopped going outside. They found her in the bathroom 6 months later. She had been dead for almost 2 weeks before anyone noticed. I moved out the next morning. I left everything. My furniture, my clothes, my divorce papers, all of it. I walked out with my phone and my keys, and I never went back. But here is what I still think about even now. That expression on her face. The grief on it wasn't rage, it wasn't malice, it was just loss. Pure, unbearable loss. And sometimes I wonder if I wasn't what she was waiting for at all. I wonder if every man who moves into that apartment looks just slightly like him.
My name is Hiroshi. I am a wildlife photographer. I am 41, and I have spent time alone in some of the most remote places on Earth. Siberia, the Congo, the Atacama Desert at 4 a.m. I tell you this because I want you to understand that fear, for me, is not a casual thing. I know what darkness feels like. I know what isolation feels like. What happened to me in Aokigahara, in the sea of trees, was unlike anything I have ever experienced in 30 years of working in wild places. Aokigahara sits at the base of Mount Fuji. You may know it by its other name, the Suicide Forest. The name is grim, and it is earned. But what draws fewer headlines is the spiritual dimension of the place. The Japanese believe the forest is haunted by the yurei, the unquiet dead. Onryo, specifically. People who died there in suffering have not left. The magnetic rock beneath the forest floor plays havoc with compasses. GPS becomes unreliable. The trees grow so densely the wind barely penetrates. It is, in every technical sense, easy to get lost there. And I did. Not permanently, but long enough. I had been hired to photograph wildlife near the forest's edge for a conservation publication. I went in alone, which in retrospect was idiotic, but felt manageable at the time. I had been in there perhaps 4 hours when my compass began behaving oddly, rotating slowly, settling, then rotating again. I had my GPS, but the signal was inconsistent. I marked waypoints carefully as I moved. Then I found the shrine. It was small and clearly very old, a stone structure no bigger than a mailbox, covered with moss, with paper offerings inside that had long since turned to paste. Around it, tied to the trees, were dozens of thin strips of cloth, some white, some red. They had been there a long time. Whatever they were meant to mark, it was not recent. I crouched to photograph it. The forest was completely silent, not the silence of emptiness, the silence of held breath. Then I smelled something, sweet and chemical and deeply wrong, and the temperature dropped so suddenly I could see my breath in summer. I stood up slowly. She was between 2 trees about 4 meters ahead of me. I say she because of the hair and the posture, long black hair hanging forward, body angled like a question mark, hands pressed flat against the bark of 2 separate trees as though bracing herself. She wore what appeared to be a white funeral kimono. Her feet were bare on the wet earth. I am a rational man. I stood there and I went through every rational explanation. A lost hiker in costume, a local conducting some kind of ritual, a trick of the light on pale birch bark. Then she turned her head, not her body, just her head, far past where a neck should naturally allow. The sound she made was not a voice. It was layered, multiple tones braided together into something between a wail and a whisper that I felt in my chest cavity more than heard with my ears. It rose for 2 seconds and then cut off like a switch had been thrown. I ran. I am not ashamed of this. I ran in a direction that felt like a way, and I did not stop until I broke through the tree line onto the road. I had scratches from branches I don't remember passing through. My camera had been recording in video mode on my shoulder strap. When I reviewed the footage later, you could see the shrine clearly. You could see the cloth strips shifting in air too still to move them. You could see the trees where she had been standing. But she wasn't on the footage. Not even a shape, not even a shadow. The next morning, I spoke to a Shinto priest from the town near the forest. When I described what I had seen, the kimono, the hair, the angle of the head, the sound, he nodded slowly and said,
That is the woman who drowned in the stream near the North Path many years ago. Her name is not spoken anymore. She does not want to be photographed." He looked at my camera when he said this. I have never been back.
My name is Daichi. I'm 28, a student, or I was, before my third year of university started eating me alive from the inside. That winter was the worst of my life. Failing marks, a falling out with my family over my choice of major, and the kind of loneliness that sits on your chest like a stone at 2 a.m. when everyone else is asleep. I was taking the last train home one night in February, the Matanuchi line, almost empty, a couple of salarymen sleeping, one woman reading, me at the end of the car. It was past midnight, and I had my headphones in, not listening to anything, just wearing them like armor against having to acknowledge the world. That's when I noticed her, 3 seats ahead of me, on the opposite side of the aisle. She was small, hunched, a dark coat that looked too thin for February, black hair fanning out over her shoulders. What caught my attention first was that she wasn't moving at all. Not just still, frozen, rigid in a way that is deeply uncomfortable to watch in a living person. I almost looked away. Then she turned. Not her body, her face. She turned to look directly at me from what should have been an impossible angle, and her face was wrong. Not monstrous, wrong in the way a photograph of a face becomes wrong when you look at it too long. Familiar in shape, but empty in a way that made my stomach lurch. Her eyes were pitch black, not dark irises, no sclera at all, just black. The train lurched, the lights flickered. When they came back on, she was gone. The salaryman across from me jerked awake, looked at the empty seat, and then looked at me. His face had gone completely white. He grabbed his bag, moved to the next car, and did not look back. 2 stops later, I got off. Not my stop, just any stop, and stood on the platform in the winter cold until my heartbeat felt like something that belonged to me again. I found out later from an online forum dedicated to Tokyo ghost sightings that there are multiple accounts of a female apparition on that specific train line. Most describe her the same way: the coat, the hair, the turned head, the black eyes. The forum had a pinned post that offered context. In the 1990s, a young woman had thrown herself in front of a Matanuchi train after her boyfriend ended their relationship and denied the existence of their unborn child. Her name was never made public, in keeping with the policy of Japanese media around such incidents. But the forum post ended with something that has stayed with me every single time I step onto a train at night. Someone had written, "She isn't haunting the train, she's looking for him, and she will ride this line until she finds him, or until someone sees her and finally understands why." I read that, and I had to close my laptop because I was shaking. Because here is the thing about Onryo that the movies never quite capture. They are not monsters. They were not born into malice. They are us. They are the worst version of what happens when a human being is broken so completely that not even death can put them down. And if that doesn't keep you up tonight, consider this. Every train line, every old apartment building, every quiet forest in this country has its history, its grief, its unfinished business. The dead don't always leave. Sometimes they wait. And sometimes, in the flicker of a light, in the sound behind the wall, in the face at the end of an empty train car, you find out they've been waiting for you. Sleep well,